Setting boundaries isn't telling people what they should do. Setting boundaries is telling people how you're going to respond to the things that they do. Welcome back, friends. I'm so excited for today's episode. We're going to talk all about setting boundaries and what that means and what that looks like. So this week we've been talking all about productivity, being productive, and in Monday's episode we actually talked about setting boundaries, but I wanted to dive into that a little bit deeper because so often, like I mentioned, if you're anything like me, someone would come up to you, need something, you drop what you're working on, and you attend to them. And while that works with newborns and small children, it's important for you to tell people how to treat you. And by doing that with adults and older children, you're telling them that what you're working on doesn't actually really matter and that you'll drop everything for them. This is really common if you're a people pleaser, which is really just common as a human. And it can be so hard to set boundaries. And then at the end of the day, you're wondering why the heck you didn't get anything done. And it's because you dropped everything that you needed to do to attend to everyone else. And while there is a time and a place to attend to everyone else, like I said, with a newborn or a toddler, perhaps a younger child, it's also really important for the functioning of your life and your family and your business, whatever it is you got working on, that you attend to the things that you need to do. So setting boundaries. It is so important, but it's also super foreign. I also think there's a lot of miscommunication around it and what it means and what it looks like. So setting boundaries is not telling people, for instance, you're an employee, you work 9 to 5, right? And setting a boundary isn't telling people, don't email me after 5. Setting a boundary is saying that if you email me after 5, I'll respond the next day. It's not telling people what they should and shouldn't do. It's telling them how you're going to respond. So for instance, if you call me and I'm working on something else, I will respond to you as soon as I'm done, rather than don't call me, I'm working on something. And this isn't just something that you can do with an employer-employee kind of relationship. It's also something that you can do at home. For instance, if you're working on getting the dishes done or you're working on putting away the laundry, simply just having a conversation with your children of age, right? Toddlers aren't necessarily going to get this, but you can start working on this with them too. Like, hey, I'm doing the laundry right now, so if there's anything that you need, I will get it for you as soon as I'm done with what I'm working on. Yeah, they're gonna freak out. They're toddlers, right? They want their snack and they want it now. But when you start respecting your time, you're teaching other people how to respect your time. And then you'll start to see people like, hey, when you get a chance, hey, when you're done with what you're working on, I need your help with this. Then they'll start to understand that they're gonna have to be patient while you finish what you're working on, whether this is with your business, whether this is with your spouse, whether this is with your boss or your older kiddos. They're going to start to have that respect for the fact that you have things to do too, and those things are important. Because they are, mama. All the things that you're working on are so important, and they help the whole entire house function, right? And so have that mindset that you are setting this boundary and it's for the betterment of them. They're going to see it as like, wow, mom, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it. And they're going to be kids about it. But you know that putting away the laundry is going to help the house run smoother tomorrow. So just knock it out and get it done. I also want to branch off on this a little bit to not necessarily being productive, but just managing people in your life and teaching them how to respect you and your family. And I want to frame this in the way of homeschooling, because if you homeschool, then you're going to understand this. And if you don't, then there might be some people who make comments about the things that you do in your life with your job, with your children, with all of the things you got going on. And this will hopefully make sense for you too. But for instance, there have been a lot of people who have made comments as far as us homeschooling our kids and even trying to quiz our kids on what different things mean to really gauge their knowledge. And I'm using air quotes with that because they are expecting the child to have a public school knowledge, right? And they're trying to see if you're really doing a good job. All that to say, there are people who come and call into question things that you're doing in your life. And instead of telling people, don't make those comments, you can set a boundary and say, when you make those comments, we're going to have to leave. Or when you make those comments, I'm not going to allow alone time with my child. Or when you make those comments, we're going to have to change the conversation because that's not something that I'm going to allow to continue in my life. And so if you want to make those comments, I'm going to distance myself. Instead of telling that person, don't make those comments altogether, right? It goes back to the very beginning. Telling people what they can and can't do is not going to be helpful. People don't like to be told what they can and can't do, and people are not going to listen. But when you tell people how you're going to respond to the things that they do, then they're going to start to pay attention. So if you continue to make comments like that, we're going to have to distance ourselves. We will no longer hang out with you. That is setting a boundary that people are going to start to pay attention to. They'll realize that I can continue making those comments and not have so much proximity with that family, or I can just stop making those comments. And then that gives them a choice on if they want to continue making those comments or if they don't. So when you think about setting boundaries, we talked about it in a productivity way, but we also talked about it in a relationship way. When you think about setting boundaries, decide for you how you're going to respond. And then let the person decide if they want to continue to have all of these expectations of you, possibly disrespect you, all of these things. They'll know how you're going to respond, and then the ball's in their court. If they want to continue to do that, you're going to be consistent with what boundaries you've set, and then they'll learn, or they won't. And either way, it's okay. And that is where it's super important to be consistent with the boundaries that you set. Going back to the example with the boss, if you tell people, I won't respond to your email after 5 until the next day, but then they see you responding at 6:30 or 7 or 8:30 or 9, they're not going to believe you. And then they're going to begin to expect you to respond to their email that they sent at 6:30 that night at 9, because even though you set the boundary, you weren't too consistent with the boundary that you set. And so, are you really quite serious about your boundaries? I don't think so. And they're going to think that you're full of it. This gets more complicated in those relationship boundaries where you say, if that's a comment you're going to make, I'm going to distance myself, and then you don't. They're going to think that you don't really care, or maybe that day you were overreacting, and they're going to continue making those comments. So the biggest thing about setting boundaries is being consistent in the beginning. When you set that boundary, make sure it's something you can actually stick to and be consistent with it. It's going to feel really hard at first. You're going to get some resistance and some pushback from whatever boundary you're setting. So for instance, for me at work, I set a boundary that you guys can email me all day long, but I'm turning off email notifications. And so I will check my email at 9, at 12:30, and at 4:30. If you email me in between, I'm not going to respond until those times. I got pushback stating that I need to be available and on my email, and I just shared I need time to be able to work on the things that you're emailing me about, right? So all the emails you sent yesterday, I need to work on those today. Tomorrow I'll work on all the emails that you sent for the tasks that I need to do from yesterday. And so I was met with resistance, but I stayed consistent and I advocated for myself too. And that resistance is normal. People want you to continue to just put up with whatever they got going on. They want you to continue to drop everything that you're working on and do what they want you to do. But over time, when you're consistent with respecting your time and being consistent with your boundaries, they're going to learn how to respect what you have put in place, and they'll adapt to it. And they'll also see that, one, you're super productive and you're on it and you're doing all the things, or you're actually a better friend for putting those boundaries in place, and you're showing up in a much better way, and that's respectable all on its own. So that is how you set a boundary. That is what a boundary is. If you have any questions or you have a situation where it's just not working the way that you thought it might, reach out. Every situation is going to be different, but the biggest thing is just remembering that a boundary is not telling someone what they can and can't do. It's telling someone how you're going to respond to what they do. And be consistent with the boundaries that you set, because that's going to make all the difference. So I hope that helped. If you have any questions, please message me on Instagram at Calling Women Higher. I want to be here to make this work for you, because ultimately you becoming the best you is how you're going to build a life that you love. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.